The hand around her waist felt like a public execution. Not violent. Worse. Gentle. Because 300 witnesses saw affection where Berta Gallo felt ownership, and the most dangerous man in Milan had just rewritten her night without asking permission. The Venetian Grand Ballroom glittered under chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Marble floors reflected faces like mirrors in a confessional. Politicians with blood money and offshore accounts, socialites whose jewelry came with insurance policies thicker than marriage vows, men in tailored suits who controlled empires built on fear disguised as business. Berta wore emerald silk that clung like a second skin, beautiful, expensive, borrowed. Just like her identity tonight. She was Dante Moretti's fiancée, fake but paid well, 20,000 euros to smile at the right moments, laugh at mediocre jokes, and help a mid-level money launderer pretend he'd landed a woman out of his league. Her brother's gambling debts required convincing theater. She hadn't counted on him being in the audience. Nino Toscano. The name alone could empty rooms or fill them, depending on what he wanted. The man himself could stop hearts with a glance. He stood 30 feet away, whiskey untouched in his hand, watching her the way wolves watched separated prey. His tuxedo fit like armor over shoulders that promised controlled violence. A thin scar traced his cheekbone, the only flaw on a face carved from stone and arrogance. And he was staring directly at her. Berta's breath caught. She turned back to Dante, forcing herself to focus on his nervous chatter about shipping routes and tax havens, but her skin prickled with awareness. Every survival instinct she'd honed over 26 years screamed one word: run. But running drew attention. And in Nino Toscano's world, attention was the fastest way to disappear. "You're distracted," Dante hissed, his grip tightening on her elbow. His palms sweated through her glove. "Smile, look like you're enjoying this." She did. She was good at pretending. She'd been doing it her whole life. 20 minutes crawled past, then 30. Berta began to think she'd imagined the weight of Nino's gaze. Perhaps he'd been looking past her at someone more important, more... Dante Moretti. The voice came from behind them, smooth as aged bourbon and twice as dangerous. Dante went rigid beside her. When they turned, Nino Toscano stood close enough that Berta could see gold flecks in eyes that cataloged weaknesses like a banker counted assets, close enough that she could smell cedar and gunpowder and something darker, something that made her pulse spike with primal warning. "Mr. Toscano," Dante stammered. His hand dropped from Berta's elbow like it had touched fire. "What an honor. I didn't expect... Who is this?" Not curiosity. Inventory. Nino's gaze had shifted to Berta, and the intensity of it felt like being pinned under stage lights during an interrogation. She lifted her chin, refusing to shrink, even as every nerve ending screamed danger. "This is Berta," Dante said quickly. "My fiancée." Something flickered in Nino's expression, too fast to name, too deliberate to be accidental. "Your fiancé," he repeated, tasting the word like wine he suspected had turned to vinegar. His eyes never left Berta's face. "How fortunate for you." The silence stretched. Then Nino smiled. Not warmth. Promise. "Dance with me." If you've ever smiled through fear because breaking character felt more dangerous than staying silent, this story already knows you. Some of us survive by pretending we're fine when we're not, by playing roles we never auditioned for, by saying yes when every cell in our body screams no. If that's you, if you've ever been seen by the wrong person at the wrong time, subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets. Because these stories don't judge how you survived. They just remind you that survival isn't the end of your story. Hit subscribe, drop a comment if this already feels too familiar, and come back for what comes next, because Berta's night is about to get much, much worse. The words weren't a question. They were a recalibration of power. Dante opened his mouth to protest. "I wasn't asking you," Nino said, his attention locked on Berta like a scope on a target. Or her permission. The ballroom quieted in spreading waves. Conversations died mid-sentence, heads turned. The orchestra continued playing, but the music felt suddenly irrelevant. Berta understood the calculus immediately. Refuse and insult the most dangerous man in the room. Accept and shatter the charade she'd been paid to maintain. Either way, she lost. Unless she changed the rules. "I'd be delighted," she said, her voice steady despite the war drumming of her heart. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, calloused, absolutely certain. He led her onto the dance floor as 300 people watched in silence. When his other hand settled at the small of her back, Berta felt the touch like a brand through thin silk. Not resting, claiming. They moved together in perfect rhythm. Nino danced the way he did everything else, with complete control and zero wasted motion. He held her closer than propriety allowed, close enough that she could feel the steady beat of his heart, close enough that the rest of the ballroom blurred into background noise. "You're not his fiancée," Nino said quietly, his voice pitched only for her. Berta's step faltered. His hand tightened at her back, steadying her, keeping her locked in the rhythm. "I don't know what you—" "Don't lie to me, Berta."
Absolutely stunned.
Her name in his mouth sounded like ownership, like he'd already decided she belonged to him and was just waiting for her to catch up. "Dante Moretti is a coward and a thief who launders money for the Calabrese family and does it poorly. He doesn't have the spine to court a woman like you." His thumb traced a slow, deliberate circle against her spine, intimate, possessive, impossible to ignore. "And he certainly doesn't have the means to keep you. You don't know anything about me." "I know you're in trouble," Nino said, his lips nearly brushing her ear. "I know you're here because you need money. I know you're terrified right now, but you're too proud to show it." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "And I know that every man in this room is wondering how Dante Moretti got his hands on something so exquisite when they couldn't." Heat flooded Berta's face. Not embarrassment, fury. Because he was right about everything. And they both knew it. "You're wrong." The words came out steadier than Berta felt. Nino's smile deepened. Not kindness, but recognition. Like he'd just confirmed a theory he'd been testing. "Am I?"
"I can't."
He spun her gently, the movement forcing her body closer to his. When they came back together, his hand had shifted from her back to her waist. Lower, more possessive, unmistakably visible to every person watching. "Then tell me to let you go. Tell me you belong to him." The challenge hung between them like a loaded gun. She should say it, collect her money, disappear into the crowd before this man decided she was worth keeping. But belonging to Dante was a performance. And belonging to Nino Toscano, that was a different kind of cage entirely. "I don't belong to anyone," she whispered. His eyes darkened with something that looked like hunger wrapped in satisfaction. "Yes," he said softly, his thumb tracing that maddening circle against her waist. "You do. You just don't know it yet."
I can't keep this any longer.
Around them, the ballroom had become an audience. Women whispered behind champagne flutes. Men recalculated alliances with the speed of traders watching markets crash. Dante had vanished completely, smart enough to recognize when he'd lost a war he didn't know he'd entered. Berta felt the shift in air pressure. She was no longer Dante's prop. She was Nino Toscano's fascination. And in his world, fascination was more dangerous than anger. "What are you doing?" she breathed, trying to pull back without making a scene. His grip didn't tighten, but it didn't loosen either. "Protecting what's mine. I'm not—" "You became mine the moment you walked into this room wearing that dress like armor and carrying secrets in your eyes." His voice dropped lower, intimate enough that only she could hear. "You became mine when you looked at me without flinching, even though we both know you should be afraid." He leaned closer, his mouth near her ear, his next words a dark promise that sent heat coiling through her body despite every warning screaming in her mind. No one touches you now, not Dante, not the men he owes, not anyone who thinks they can use you to settle debts or buy favors. His breath was warm against her skin. Do you understand what I'm saying, Berta? She understood perfectly. He wasn't offering protection. He was declaring ownership. And 300 witnesses had just watched him do it. The music swelled toward its final crescendo. The waltz was ending. In seconds, she'd have to make a choice that would define everything that came after. Stay in his arms and accept the claim he'd made publicly. Or walk away and face whatever consequences Dante's world had waiting for her. Berta Gallo had survived 26 years by being smarter than men who underestimated her. So she did something Nino Toscano clearly didn't expect. She stopped dancing. Right there, in the center of the ballroom, with every eye in Milan's elite watching. The orchestra stuttered into confused silence. Conversations died. And Berta stepped back from Nino's arms, her chin lifted, her voice carrying across the sudden quiet like a blade cutting through silk. You want to claim me in front of all these people? His expression shifted, surprise flickering across features too controlled to show weakness. Then you should know exactly what you're claiming, Mr. Toscano. If you've ever had to choose between a dangerous truth and a safe lie, you know this moment. The moment where staying silent keeps you safe. But speaking up changes everything. Berta just made her choice. And it's about to cost her everything she thought she knew about survival. Drop A in the comments if you'd have done what she just did. Hit subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you need to see how this ends, because backing down isn't in her DNA. This is where the real war starts. Don't miss it. Shock rippled through the ballroom like a stone thrown into still water. No one stopped Nino Toscano mid-performance. No one challenged him in public. Certainly not a woman wearing a fake engagement ring and 20,000 euros worth of desperation. But Berta wasn't done. She took a deliberate step closer, invading his space the way he'd been invading hers all night, close enough that she could see the dangerous curiosity replacing surprise in his eyes. I'm not some prize to be won or territory to be conquered, she said, her voice steady and clear enough for the balconies to hear. I'm not fragile, I'm not helpless, and I'm sure as hell not grateful. A few gasps broke the silence. Berta ignored them. She kept her gaze locked on Nino's, watching his expression shift from shock to something far more unsettling, interest sharpened by respect. If you want to stand between me and the world, fine. She tilted her head, letting a dangerous smile curve her lips. But understand this, Mr. Toscano, I don't need saving. I need a partner, someone who sees me as an equal, not a possession. The silence that followed felt like the moment before thunder. Then Nino Toscano did something that made her knees weak and her survival instincts scream in equal measure. He smiled. Not the cold, calculated expression he wore like armor. A real smile. Sharp and predatory and absolutely devastating. Equal, he repeated, like the word delighted him in ways she couldn't begin to understand. He closed the distance between them in one fluid step. His hand caught her chin, tilting her face up to his, and the intimacy of the gesture in front of 300 people felt more dangerous than any threat he could have made. You want to stand beside me? His voice was low, meant only for her, but somehow the entire room seemed to lean in to hear it. In my world, with everything that means? I've been surviving in dangerous worlds my whole life, Berta said, refusing to look away even though his proximity made her heart race. The only difference is you're honest about the blood on your hands. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, possessive, testing, deliberate. If I make you mine, Berta, truly mine, there's no walking away, no changing your mind when things get dark, no running when you see what I'm capable of. His eyes searched hers. You understand that? Do you understand, she countered, her voice dropping to match his, that I won't be controlled, that I'll fight you when you're wrong, that I'll never be the quiet, obedient woman standing 3 steps behind you at events like this? For a long moment, Nino just stared at her. Then he laughed. Low, genuine, transformative. The sound changed his entire face, making him look younger, less burdened by whatever violence had carved that scar into his cheekbone. "Madonna," he murmured, half prayer, half curse. "You're going to be magnificent." He turned to address the ballroom, his arms sliding around her waist again, but different this time, not possession. Partnership. "Let me be clear," Nino announced, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who'd never had to raise it to be obeyed. "Berta Gallo is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her answers to me. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "Anyone who so much as looks at her wrong will discover exactly how creative I can be with consequences." Fear shifted through the crowd like wind through grass. But Berta wasn't finished either. Before Nino could lead her away, she turned back to face the 300 witnesses one final time. "One more thing," she called out, her voice clear and unapologetic. "My protection goes both ways. He's mine as much as I'm his. Anyone who forgets that will have 2 problems instead of 1. The shock was immediate. Absolute. Beautiful. But the expression on Nino's face when she looked back at him, pride mixed with desire and fierce, unguarded approval, that was everything. Was that revenge? Or liberation? Because Berta Gallo just rewrote the rules in a world where women aren't supposed to have any power at all. If you've ever wanted to stand up to someone who thought they owned you, but didn't know if you were strong enough, comment liberation below. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you believe partnership is scarier and more powerful than possession. Because this is where Nino and Berta discover what happens when 2 people refuse to play by anyone's rules but their own. And trust me, it's not what you think. Hit that subscribe button. This story is just getting started. Outside, the night air hit Berta's skin like freedom. Or maybe just the illusion of it. Nino's car waited at the curb, sleek, black, armored, the kind of vehicle that promised safety and imprisonment in equal measure. But he didn't rush her toward it. Instead, he pulled her close, away from the photographers and the curious eyes still watching from the ballroom windows. His forehead rested against hers, and for the first time all night, his control seemed to crack just slightly. "You could have just agreed," he said quietly, his voice stripped of the authority he'd worn inside. "Played along, made this easy." "Where's the fun in that?" Berta's smile felt dangerous even to herself. "Besides, you would have been bored within a week." "Bored." He shook his head, and something like wonder crossed his face. "Tesoro, you have no idea what you've just started." "Good," she whispered, her lips almost touching his. "Neither do you." When he kissed her, it wasn't gentle. It was claiming and consent wrapped together, a promise and a warning delivered in the space between one breath and the next. He tasted like whiskey and control slipping, like power that had finally found something it couldn't dominate and didn't want to. Berta felt herself falling into it, into him, into the dangerous possibility that maybe, just maybe, partnership with a monster was better than safety with men who only saw her as currency. But then, reality crashed back. Because headlights swept across them, and a car that definitely wasn't Nino's pulled up too fast, too close. The back door opened before the vehicle fully stopped. And Berta's younger brother stumbled out, his face bloodied, his hands zip-tied behind his back. "Berta!" Marco's voice cracked with fear and pain. 2 men followed him out, enforcers she recognized from the Calabrese family, the same people Dante laundered money for, the same people her brother owed. The same people who just watched her publicly humiliate their business associate and align herself with their biggest rival. "Berta Gallo," the taller enforcer said, his smile cold and professional. "You've had an interesting evening." Nino's entire body went rigid beside her. His hand moved to the small of her back. Not affection now, but positioning, putting himself between her and the threat. "You have 3 seconds to get back in that car," Nino said, his voice deadly calm, "before I forget we're in public." The enforcer's smile widened. "See, that's the problem, Mr. Toscano. You can protect her all you want, but her brother?" He grabbed Marco by the hair, yanking his head back. "He still owes us 40,000 euros, and his payment just got a lot more interesting." Marco whimpered. Berta's heart stopped. "The way we see it," the enforcer continued, "Berta has 2 choices. She can come with us right now and work off her brother's debt the old-fashioned way, or—" He pulled out a knife, pressed it against Marco's throat. "Or we start sending him back to her in pieces. Her choice." Berta felt Nino's hand tighten against her back, a silent message. "Don't move, let me handle this." But Marco was her brother, her responsibility, her fault for thinking she could play in dangerous worlds without consequences catching up. She'd just claimed her independence in front of 300 people, demanded to be seen as an equal, refused to be anyone's possession. And now the universe was testing exactly how much that freedom was worth. "Berta, no!" Nino's voice held a warning. But she was already stepping forward, away from his protection, toward her brother. "Let him go," she said. "I'll come with you. Would you trade your freedom for someone you love? Would you walk away from the first person who ever saw you as an equal, just to save family who put you in danger in the first place?" Berta just made her choice, and it's about to destroy everything she fought for tonight. Comment "stay" if you think she should have stayed with Nino. Comment "go" if you understand why she couldn't. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you've ever had to choose between saving yourself and saving someone else, because this is where we find out if love is stronger than loyalty. And I promise you, nobody's walking away from this unchanged. Hit subscribe. You need to see what happens next. Nino moved faster than thought. 1 second, Berta was walking toward her brother. The next, Nino's arm was around her waist, yanking her back against his chest with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. "No," he said simply. Not to the enforcers. To her. "Let me go." Berta struggled against his grip. "Not a chance in hell." His voice was steel wrapped in ice. The taller enforcer laughed. "Touching! But the girl made her choice, Toscano. You gonna start a war over someone else's debt?" "Yes." The single word dropped like a guillotine. The enforcer's smile faltered. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Nino's arm tightened out around Berta, keeping her immobile. "That woman belongs to me now, publicly, witnessed by half of Milan's elite. You think I made that claim just to hand her over to you the same night?" He shifted slightly, and Berta realized with cold clarity that he'd positioned them so his body blocked any clear shot at her. "Her brother's debt is 40,000, Nino continued, his tone conversational despite the violence humming beneath it. "I'll wire you 80 by morning, double payment plus interest for your inconvenience." The enforcers exchanged glances. "Our boss doesn't like being undermined." "Your boss," Nino interrupted, "is smart enough to take a profit over a principle, especially when the alternative is explaining to the Calabrese family why he started a territorial war over a gambling debt that's not even worth a decent car." Silence. Calculations happening behind the enforcer's eyes. Marco was still on his knees, knife still pressed to his throat, but the pressure had eased slightly. "Tell your boss I'll call him tomorrow," Nino said. "We'll discuss terms like civilized men, but you leave now, and you leave the boy." "And if we don't?" Nino smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Berta had ever seen. "Then you'll discover exactly how many judges, prosecutors, and police commanders owe me favors, and how creative I can be about collecting them all at once." He paused. "Your choice. 80,000 euros and you walk away clean. Or you test me and find out why people who cross me tend to disappear into very small boxes." The enforcer with the knife looked at his partner. Some silent communication passed between them. Then he released Marco, shoving him forward onto the pavement. 80,000 by morning, he said. And Toscano, this doesn't make us even, just delays the conversation. I look forward to it. The enforcers got back in their car, drove away, and only then did Nino release Berta. She stumbled forward, dropping to her knees beside Marco, her hands shaking as she checked him for serious injuries. "You're okay," she whispered, even though they both knew it was a lie. "You're okay, You shouldn't have done that!" Nino's voice came from above them, cold and furious. Berta looked up, still kneeling in the street, still holding her brother. "He's my family. And you're mine." The possessiveness in his voice was absolute. "You don't get to sacrifice yourself anymore, Berta. Not for him. Not for anyone. Do you understand what I just did? The war I might have started? The debt I just bought that I can't ever collect on? I didn't ask you to. I don't care what you asked for." His control finally cracked, fury blazing across his face. I told you what it meant to be mine, that I protect what's mine, that no one touches you." He crouched down, getting eye level with her, his hand gripping her chin and forcing her to meet his gaze. "That includes you, Tesoro. You don't get to throw yourself into danger to save anyone. Not anymore." Berta's throat burned with unshed tears. "He's my brother. And you're my equal." Nino's thumb brushed across her cheek, the gesture tender despite the anger still simmering in his eyes. "Which means when someone threatens you, you don't negotiate. You tell me, and I handle it." "That's not partnership." "Partnership," he interrupted, "means trusting me to have your back the same way I'm trusting you to have mine. It means not making decisions that could get you killed without at least consulting me first. Is this love? Or just another cage with better lighting? Because Nino just saved Berta's life and possibly started a war doing it. But he also just told her she doesn't get to make her own choices anymore. Comment love if you think he's protecting her. Comment cage if you think he's controlling her. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you've ever wondered where protection ends and possession begins, because this is the moment Berta and Nino have to figure out if partnership is even possible in a world built on dominance. And trust me, the answer is going to break one of them. Or both. Don't miss it. Nino's penthouse sat 40 stories above Milan, glass and steel wrapped around silence that felt more dangerous than any threat shouted in the streets below. Berta stood at the window, watching the city lights blur through exhaustion and unshed tears, while Marco slept on the guest room bed, cleaned up, bandaged, safe for the first time in months. Safe because Nino Toscano had decided he was worth saving. Not because he deserved it. "He's going to rehab," Nino said from behind her, his voice quiet but absolute. "Tomorrow. A private facility in Switzerland. No phones, no visitors, no way to gamble himself into another hole that puts you in danger." Berta didn't turn around. "You can't just ship my brother to another country." "I can, I am, and you're going to let me." His reflection appeared into the glass beside hers, controlled, certain, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with the late hour. Because the alternative is he stays in Milan and gets himself killed within a week. And you know it. She did know it. God help her, she knew it. "This isn't partnership," she said quietly. "This is you making decisions and telling me to accept them." "No." Nino moved closer, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence like heat against her back. "Partnership is me handling the threat while you were too busy trying to sacrifice yourself to think strategically. Partnership is me using resources you don't have to solve a problem that shouldn't have been yours to begin with." He paused. "And partnership is you trusting that I'm doing this for you, not to you." Berta closed her eyes. "What if I can't tell the difference anymore?" The question hung between them like broken glass. When Nino finally spoke again, his voice was rougher, stripped of the certainty he wore like armor. Then we figure it out together. But you don't get to walk away every time it gets hard to tell where I end and you begin." She turned to face him then. Found him closer than she'd expected, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her chest ache. "You paid 80,000 euros for my brother's debt," she said. "Started a potential war with the Calabrese family. Put yourself at risk. Why?" "You know why." "Say it anyway." Nino's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he'd retreat behind that controlled facade he showed the rest of the world. But then his hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. "Because watching you try to sacrifice yourself for someone who's never protected you the way you've protected him made me realize something," he said quietly. "I don't just want you, Berta. I don't just need to possess you or control you or keep you like some prize I won at that goddamn gala." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I want to be the person you trust enough to let carry some of your weight, and I'm terrified that my need to protect you is going to smother the exact thing that made me want you in the first place." The honesty in his voice cracked something open in her chest. "What thing?" she whispered. "Your refusal to be anything less than exactly who you are, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs you." His forehead rested against hers. "Especially then." Berta felt tears slip down her cheeks, not from sadness but from the relief of finally being seen completely. Not as a possession, not as a prize, as a person worth the complexity of real partnership. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "That loving you means losing myself, that needing you means becoming someone who can't survive without you." "Then we stay scared together," Nino said, "and we figure out how to build something that doesn't require either of us to be less than we are." When he kissed her this time, it tasted like truth instead of conquest, like a promise neither of them knew if they could keep, but were willing to try anyway. Have you ever been so scared of losing yourself in someone that you almost lost them instead? Berta and Nino just admitted the thing most people spend their whole lives avoiding, that love is terrifying when it's real. Comment "scared together" if you've ever felt this. Comment "worth it" if you believe love is worth the risk of losing yourself. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you need stories that don't pretend love is easy, because this is where we find out if fear is stronger than the choice to trust anyway. And I'm warning you now, what happens next is going to test everything they just promised each other. Hit subscribe. This story doesn't do fairy tales. It does truth. The call came at 3 a.m. Berta woke to Nino's phone vibrating against the nightstand, his body going rigid beside her before he'd even fully opened his eyes. He answered without greeting, listened, and the expression that crossed his face made her blood run cold. "When?" His voice was lethal calm. "How many?" A pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lock down the building. No one in or out until I arrive." He ended the call, sat up, started dressing with the efficient speed of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "What happened?" Berta asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. "Someone hit one of my warehouses on the east side." Nino pulled on his shirt, his movements controlled but furious. "Killed 3 of my men, burned 2 million euros worth of product." Her stomach dropped. "The Calabrese family? Maybe, or someone else using last night as an excuse to test my defenses." He turned to look at her, and the hardness in his eyes was the face he showed enemies, not lovers. "Either way, I need to handle this. Now." Berta threw off the covers. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "You said partnership or—" "Partnership doesn't mean walking into a potential war zone." His control cracked, voice rising. "This is my world, Berta. My mess. My blood to spill if it comes to that. You stay here where it's safe." "Safe?" She laughed, the sound bitter. "You think anywhere is safe after last night? After you publicly claimed me and started a war over my brother's debt?" She crossed to him, getting in his space the way she had in the ballroom. If people are coming after you because of me, then I deserve to know. I deserve to see what my choices cost. Your choices? Nino's hands gripped her shoulders, not gentle but not painful either. I made that choice, Tesoro. I chose to pay your brother's debt. I chose to claim you in front of 300 witnesses. I chose to start this war, not you. We're partners, Berta said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Which means when someone attacks you, they attack us, right? Something shifted in his expression, surprise mixed with reluctant admiration. You don't know what you're asking. Then show me. For a long moment, Nino just stared at her. Then he released her shoulders, stepped back, and made a decision that would change everything. Get dressed, he said quietly. Black, nothing that shows blood easily. And Berta? Yes? Stay exactly where I tell you. Do exactly what I say, because if you get hurt because I brought you into this... His voice broke slightly. I won't forgive myself, or you. She nodded, started dressing, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just demanded entry into a world where people died for crossing invisible lines she didn't even know existed yet. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a warehouse on the outskirts of Milan. The building was still smoking. 3 bodies lay covered with tarps near the entrance. Nino's men gunned down before they could even draw weapons. Berta felt her stomach revolt, but she forced herself to look. This was the cost of loving a man whose empire was built on violence disguised as business. Nino's second-in-command met them at the car, a man named Luca with a scar running from temple to jaw and eyes that had seen too much death to be shocked by more. They knew exactly where the cameras were blind, Luca said without preamble. Professional, coordinated. This wasn't some random crew looking for a score. Inside job? Nino's voice was ice. Maybe, or someone who's been watching us long enough to map our patterns. Nino's jaw tightened. Then he turned to Berta, his expression softening just slightly. Last chance to wait in the car. She shook her head. We're scared together, remember? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Yeah, we are. He took her hand, the first time he'd shown public affection in front of his men. A statement. A claim. A warning to anyone watching that she wasn't just some woman he was protecting. She was his equal, and touching her would cost the same as touching him. They walked into the burned-out warehouse together, and Berta realized with cold clarity that partnership in Nino's world didn't mean safety. It meant choosing to stand in the line of fire anyway. Would you choose to see the darkness, even knowing you can't unsee it? Berta just walked into the exact world she was terrified of, because staying ignorant felt like a bigger betrayal than facing the truth. Comment, see it if you'd have gone with him. Comment, run if you think some truths aren't worth knowing. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you've ever loved someone whose world scared you, but losing them scared you more. Berta is about to discover what it really costs to stand beside a man who kills to protect what's his. And I promise, it's going to change how you see both of them. Don't miss it. The body under the tarp was younger than Berta expected. Maybe 23, 24 at most. She stared at the covered shape while Nino spoke in rapid Italian to his men, his voice controlled fury wrapped in strategic calculation. This boy, because that's what he was, really just a boy, had died protecting product Nino owned. Died because someone wanted to send a message. Died because violence was the language spoken here, and blood was the punctuation. His name was Matteo, Luca said quietly beside her, noticing where her attention had landed. Worked for us 6 months, sent money home to his mother in Naples every week. Berta's throat tightened. Did she know what he did for a living? Does it matter? Luca's expression was unreadable. She needed the money. He provided it. That's love in our world. Before Berta could respond, gunfire shattered the night. Not close, but not far enough either. Nino was moving before the second shot rang out, his hand gripping her arm, yanking her behind a concrete pillar with enough force that she stumbled. "Stay down," he ordered, his body covering hers, one hand braced against the pillar, the other pulling a gun from somewhere she hadn't even known he was carrying. "Don't move! Don't make a sound!" More shots, closer now. Shouting in Italian. The screech of tires. Berta's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack bone. She could feel Nino's heartbeat against her back, steady, controlled, a rhythm that suggested this wasn't his first ambush, or even his 100th. "How many?" Nino called to Luca. "3 vehicles, maybe 10 men. They're not trying to breach, just making noise." Warning shots. Yeah. Nino exhaled slowly, his body still pressed against Berta's, still shielding her from bullets that hadn't come close to their position. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. Engines revved. Cars peeled away. And silence fell wrong, heavy with threat instead of relief. "They wanted us to know they could have hit us," Luca said, "but chose not to." "Calabrese family playing games," Nino growled, "testing how far I'll go to protect what's mine." He pulled back slightly, just enough to turn Berta's face toward his eyes searching hers with an intensity that burned. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak past the fear still clogging her throat. "You're trembling." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." His thumb brushed across her cheek, and she realized with shock that she was crying. "This is what my world looks like, Berta. This is what partnership means. People shooting at us in the middle of the night, men dying for profit margins and territory disputes, living every day knowing someone might decide we're worth more dead than alive." His voice cracked slightly. "And I just brought you into the middle of it because I'm too selfish to let you go." Berta grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to hold her gaze. "I walked into this warehouse myself," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I demanded to see your world. I chose this, Nino. I chose you. Even after seeing Matteo's body, even after getting shot at, especially after." She pulled him closer, her forehead resting against his. "Because now I know exactly what it costs you to keep me safe. And I know exactly what I'm asking you to risk by staying." Something shifted in his expression, pain mixed with relief and desperate gratitude. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met," he whispered, "or the most reckless." "Can't I be both?" He laughed, broken and raw and absolutely real. Then he kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Like she was the only thing keeping him human in a world designed to strip humanity away. And Berta kissed him back with the fierce certainty that love in darkness burned brighter than love that never faced the night. "Would you stay after the shooting stopped? After seeing the body? After feeling the bullets? After knowing that loving him means becoming a target too?" Berta just chose him anyway. Comment stay if you understand why. Comment reckless if you think love shouldn't cost this much. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you've ever loved someone dangerous, not despite the risk, but because they were worth it. This is where the Calabrese family makes their next move. And this time, they're not shooting to miss. Hit subscribe. You need to see what happens when love becomes the weapon they use against each other. The meeting happened in a restaurant that closed for private events, whenever certain people needed to have conversations that couldn't happen in public. Berta sat beside Nino in a booth designed for intimidation, high-backed, positioned so he could see every entrance, far enough from other tables that whispers stayed private. Across from them sat Salvatore Calabrese, 60-something, silver hair, custom suit that cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that measured everything in terms of profit and loss. "You brought the girl," Salvatore said, his voice carrying the faint accent of someone who'd left Sicily decades ago, but never really left at all. "Interesting choice." "She's my partner," Nino said simply. "She stays." "Partner?" Salvatore smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Is that what we're calling mistresses now? Berta felt Nino's hand tighten on her thigh under the tea table. A warning. Let me handle this. But she'd demanded to be here. Demanded to be seen as equal. So she met Salvatore's gaze directly. Is that what you call the women in your life? She asked, her voice polite venom. Mistresses. Must be lonely, reducing people to their utility. Salvatore's smile widened. She has teeth. I like that. He turned his attention back to Nino. Though I wonder if you've considered what happens when those teeth bite you instead of your enemies. Get to the point, Nino said. You didn't ask for this meeting to discuss my personal life. No, I asked for this meeting to discuss the 80,000 euros you paid to my men for a debt that wasn't yours to settle. Salvatore leaned back, casual as a professor lecturing students. That money bought you a problem, Toscano, because now every gambler in Milan thinks they can run up debts with us and just find a rich protector to bail them out. Then stop extending credit to people who can't pay, Berta said before she could stop herself. The temperature in the booth dropped 10 degrees. Salvatore's eyes fixed on her with the focus of a snake deciding whether to strike. Excuse me? You heard me. Berta's heart was racing, but she kept her voice level. My brother had a gambling problem. You knew that. You extended him credit anyway because addicts are profitable until they're not. Then you act surprised when they can't pay and need to be bailed out. She leaned forward slightly. So maybe the real problem isn't Nino paying the debt. Maybe it's your business model encouraging self-destruction for profit. Silence. Then Salvatore laughed, genuine and surprised. Madonna, where did you find this one? She found me, Nino said, and there was pride in his voice despite the danger crackling in the air. And she's right. Your men knew Marco Gallo was underwater. They kept serving him anyway. Business is business. Then treat this as business too. Nino pulled a folder from his jacket, slid it across the table. I paid double the debt. In exchange, Marco Gallo's name gets removed from every credit list in the city. He's off limits, permanently. Salvatore opened the folder. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You're asking me to blacklist one gambler? That's your negotiation? I'm asking you to close one account that's more trouble than it's worth, Nino corrected. And in exchange, I'll overlook the fact that your men hit my warehouse and killed 3 of my people to send a message about a debt I already paid. The air went electric. Careful, Toscano. You're accusing me of something you can't prove. I don't need to prove it. Nino's smile was sharp as a blade. I just need you to know that I know, and that I'm choosing to settle this peacefully because starting a war over 80,000 euros is bad for both our bottom lines. He paused. But if you come after her, or her brother, or anyone connected to her again, then we stop talking business and start talking bodies. Salvatore stared at him for a long moment. Then he closed the folder, slid it back across the table. Marco Gallo is blacklisted, effective immediately. He stood, buttoning his jacket. But Toscano, you just spent 80,000 and 3 dead soldiers on a woman who challenged me to my face in my own meeting. He glanced at Berta. She better be worth the war you're inviting if this goes wrong. Then he walked out, leaving Nino and Berta alone in an AM booth that suddenly felt too small for the weight of what had just happened. You shouldn't have spoken, Nino said quietly. I know. You could have gotten us both killed. I know. You're going to give me a heart attack before I'm 40. Berta turned to look at him, found him staring at her with an expression caught between exasperation and awe. But I was right, she said. Wasn't I? Nino exhaled slowly, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like relief and terror in equal measure. Yeah, tesoro, he murmured against her lips. You were right. So we're okay? We're okay. He rested his forehead against hers. And Marco's safe, and the Calabrese family won't come after you again. Then why do you look worried? Because Salvatore's right. Nino's eyes held shadows she couldn't quite read. You just challenged a mafia boss in his own meeting and lived to tell about it. That makes you either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. Can I be both? He smiled, sad and proud and terrified. That's what I'm afraid of. Was she brave or reckless? Because Berta just challenged a mafia boss to his face and walked away alive. But Nino's worried for a reason. In his world, people who show that much courage don't survive by luck. They survive by becoming targets worth eliminating before they become threats. Comment brave if you think she did the right thing. Comment reckless if you think she just painted a target on her back. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is refuse to be invisible. This is where the Calabrese family decides what to do about the woman who won't stay quiet. And I promise, they're not going to forget her. Don't miss it. The envelope arrived 3 days after the meeting with Salvatore. Cream-colored, expensive, hand-delivered to Nino's penthouse by a courier who refused to make eye contact. Berta watched Nino's face as he opened it, watched the muscle in his jaw tighten, watched his knuckles go white around the paper. "What is it?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer wouldn't be good. He handed her the invitation without a word. You are cordially invited to the annual Calabrese Foundation Charity Gala. Black tie, +1 welcome. Attendance is strongly encouraged. The last 2 words were underlined. Twice. It's a trap, Berta said. Of course it's a trap. Nino moved to the window, staring out at Milan like the city held answers he couldn't find. Salvatore wants us visible, wants the entire organization to see that I brought an outsider into our world. Wants to measure how serious I am about protecting you when there's nowhere to hide. So we don't go. We have to go. He turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was a physical weight. Refusing would be an insult, an admission that I'm afraid of him, that you're a weakness he can exploit. Berta crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. Then we go together, and we show him exactly what he already knows, that I'm not your weakness. I'm your strength. Nino pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. He's going to test that theory, Tesoro, in front of everyone. He's going to push until one of us breaks or proves we can't be broken. Then we don't break. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. She pulled back to meet his eyes. You told me partnership means trusting each other, so trust me. Trust that I can stand beside you in that room without falling apart. Trust that I chose this knowing exactly what it would cost. His hands cupped her face with desperate gentleness. What if the cost is your life? Then I die standing beside you instead of living safe and alone. She meant it. God help her, she meant every word. That's what love is, Nino, not the absence of fear, the choice to stand anyway. The gala was everything Berta expected and worse. Held in a converted palace with marble columns and gold leaf ceilings, filled with people who wore legitimacy like costume jewelry over crimes that would make most people vomit. She wore midnight blue, Nino's choice. Elegant, conservative, a silent message. She belongs here. But the stares that followed them said otherwise. Women whispered behind champagne flutes. Men measured her with eyes that calculated her worth in different currencies, most of them ugly. And Salvatore Calabrese stood at the center of it all, watching their entrance with the satisfied expression of a chess player who just forced his opponent into an impossible position. Nino Toscano, Salvatore called out, his voice carrying across the ballroom. So glad you could make it, and you brought your partner. The pause before partner was deliberate. Insulting. Nino's hand tightened on Berta's waist, but his expression remained perfectly controlled. Salvatore, beautiful event, though I notice security seems lighter than usual. It was true. Berta had counted maybe a dozen armed guards when there should have been twice that many. Salvatore's smile widened. We're all friends here. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, Berta thought. Everything could go wrong. But she lifted her chin and smiled like she belonged in a room full of monsters wearing tuxedos. "Lovely to see you again, Mr. Calabrese," she said. "Thank you for the invitation." "The pleasure is entirely mine." Salvatore gestured toward the dance floor. "In fact, I was hoping you might honor me with a dance. I'm curious to see if you're as brave on a dance floor as you were across a negotiating table." Nino went rigid beside her, because they both understood what was really being asked. Let her dance with Salvatore and prove she's not just Nino's possession. Refuse and confirm she's exactly that. Either way, Salvatore won. Unless Berta changed the game. "I'd be delighted," she said, already stepping away from Nino's protective grip. "Berta!" Nino's voice carried a warning. She looked back at him, putting every ounce of trust and love she felt into her expression. "We don't break, remember?" Then she placed her hand in Salvatore Calabrese's and let him lead her onto a dance floor that felt more like a battlefield. "Would you dance with the man who wants to destroy you? Would you walk away from safety to prove you're not afraid, even knowing it might be the last choice you ever make?" Berta just did. And Nino has to stand there and watch, trusting that she'll survive what comes next. Comment "trust her" if you think she knows what she's doing. Comment "mistake" if you think she just gave Salvatore exactly what he wanted. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you've ever had to trust someone you love to walk into danger alone, because this is where that trust gets tested in ways neither of them expected. This is where everything changes. Don't miss it. Salvatore danced the way he negotiated, smooth, controlled, every movement calculated to create maximum discomfort while maintaining plausible deniability. He held Berta closer than propriety allowed, but not quite close enough to be openly inappropriate. "You're braver than I gave you credit for," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "Or more foolish. I haven't decided which yet." "Does it matter?" Berta kept her voice steady despite of her racing heart. "Either way, I'm here." "Yes, you are. Dancing with the man who could have you killed with a phone call, while your lover watches from across the room, probably calculating whether he can get to you before my men put 3 bullets in his chest." Salvatore spun her gently. "That's either love or insanity. Can't it be both?" He laughed, surprised and genuine. "You really are fascinating. I understand now why Toscano risked so much for you." His expression sobered. "But understanding doesn't mean forgiving. He paid your brother's debt, yes, but he also humiliated my organization by suggesting we prey on addicts. That has consequences." "So this whole gala is what? Punishment? A power play?" "Neither." Salvatore's eyes were cold despite his smile. "This is a lesson. For you, for him, for everyone watching." Berta felt ice slide down her spine. "What kind of lesson?" "The kind that teaches young women not to speak out of turn in rooms where men make life and death decisions." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "The kind that reminds powerful men that the people they love can become weapons used against them." Her breath caught. "You're going to hurt him through me." "Smart girl." Salvatore's grip tightened slightly. "But here's the thing. I'm not going to touch you. I'm not going to threaten you. I'm not going to do anything that would justify Nino starting a war to protect you." He spun her again, and Berta caught a glimpse of Nino across the ballroom, standing perfectly still, watching them with an expression that would have terrified anyone who didn't love him. "Instead," Salvatore continued, "I'm going to give you a choice, right here, right now, in front of everyone." The music was building toward its crescendo. "You can stay with Nino and watch him spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for me to decide you're more trouble than you're worth, watching everyone he loves become potential targets, living every day knowing that loving you made him vulnerable in ways he never was before." He paused, letting that sink in. "Or you can walk away, tonight, publicly, break his heart in front of the same 300 witnesses who watched him claim you, and I'll make sure your brother stays safe. Make sure you stay safe. Make sure Nino's empire stays intact without the liability you represent." Berta's vision blurred. You're asking me to choose between his safety and his heart. I'm asking you to prove you love him enough to leave. Salvatore's voice was almost kind. Because staying, that's just selfishness wrapped in romance. But leaving to protect him, that's sacrifice, that's real love. The music swelled toward its final note. So what's it going to be, Berta Gallo? Do you love him enough to destroy him, or do you love him enough to set him free? The orchestra hit its final chord. The dance ended. And Berta stood in the center of a ballroom full of monsters, faced with an impossible choice that would define the rest of her life, and Nino's. Stay and make him a target. Leave and break him completely. Either way, she lost. Unless she found a third option no one was expecting. She stepped back from Salvatore's arms, turned to face Nino across the crowded floor, and made the choice that would change everything. No. The single word fell into silence like a stone into deep water. Salvatore's expression shifted, surprise breaking through his calculated control. Excuse me? No, Berta repeated louder this time. I'm not choosing. Not your version of the choice anyway. She started walking toward Nino, her voice carrying across the ballroom. You want to teach me a lesson about speaking out of turn? About women knowing their place? About love being a liability? She stopped in the center of the dance floor. Then here's what I learned. The only people who weaponize love are people who've never actually felt it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nino's eyes widened, pride and terror warring on his face. You can threaten me, Berta continued, addressing Salvatore but speaking to the entire room. You can threaten him. You can make us targets for the rest of our lives, but you can't make me regret choosing him, and you can't make him regret choosing me. She reached Nino, took his hand. We're leaving, together, and if that makes us vulnerable, if that makes us targets, then we'll be vulnerable together. Because that's what partnership actually means. She turned back to Salvatore one last time. Thank you for the dance, and the lesson. I learned something valuable tonight. What's that? Salvatore's voice was dangerous. That love isn't a weakness you exploit. Berta smiled, fierce and unafraid. It's a strength you can't comprehend. Then she and Nino walked out of the gala together. Out of the palace. Into a night that promised consequences neither of them could fully imagine. But they walked into it side by side. And that made all the difference. Was she right? Or did she just sign both their death warrants? Because Berta just rejected the safe choice and doubled down on love in a room full of people who see love as the ultimate weakness. Salvatore wanted her to prove she loved Nino by leaving. She proved it by staying. Comment stayed if you think she made the right choice. Comment doomed if you think she just got them both killed. Subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets if you believe love is worth the risk, even when the cost might be everything. This is where the consequences come due. And I promise, neither of them is ready for what happens next. Hit subscribe. This story doesn't do easy answers. The first consequence came before they even made it home. Nino's phone exploded with calls the moment they left the palace. Associates demanding explanations, allies questioning his judgment, enemies smelling blood in the water. He ignored them all. But Berta could see the cost in the rigid set of his shoulders, the white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel, the muscle ticking in his jaw like a countdown to detonation. Say it, she said quietly. Say what? That I just made everything worse, that walking out like that was reckless, that I should have played the game instead of flipping the board. Nino was silent for 3 blocks. Then he pulled the car over, sudden enough that Berta's seatbelt locked, and turned to face her with an intensity that stole her breath. You were magnificent. She blinked. What? In that ballroom, facing down Salvatore, refusing to be manipulated into choosing between bad options and worse ones. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You were absolutely magnificent and terrifying, and I have never been more in love with you or more afraid for you in my entire life. Berta's throat tightened. Nino? He's going to retaliate. The words came out raw. Not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. But Salvatore doesn't forgive public humiliation. He'll wait until we feel safe, until we think maybe we got away with it, and then he'll strike where it hurts most. Then we'll be ready. You don't understand. Nino's grip tightened slightly, not painful but desperate. I've made enemies before. I've survived assassination attempts, territorial wars, betrayals from people I trusted. But I've never had someone I couldn't afford to lose. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in her chest. You're not going to lose me. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. Berta covered his hand with hers. Because I'm not some fragile thing you need to protect from your world anymore. I walked into that gala knowing exactly what it meant. I danced with Salvatore knowing he was trying to break us. I chose you in front of everyone who matters in your world. She leaned closer. So stop treating me like I don't know what I signed up for. Stop waiting for me to realize I made a mistake and run. I'm not running, Nino. Not from you, not from this, not ever. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. What if loving you gets you killed? Then I die loved. Her voice didn't waver. Which is more than most people get. The second consequence arrived at dawn. Berta woke to voices in the living room, Nino and Luca, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded like barely controlled fury. She pulled on Nino's shirt and padded barefoot to the doorway. Both men stopped talking the moment they saw her. What happened? She asked, though the expressions on their faces already told her it was bad. Luca looked at Nino, some silent question passing between them. Nino nodded once. 3 of our suppliers pulled their contracts this morning, Luca said, citing concerns about organizational stability. 2 of our shipping partners are suddenly experiencing unforeseen delays, and the club on Via Manzoni, the one that brings in $500,000 a month, just got hit with a surprise health inspection that's shutting us down for at least 2 weeks. Berta's stomach dropped. Salvatore, Nino confirmed. He's not coming after us directly. He's bleeding us economically, making it expensive to keep you, making every day we stay together cost me money, reputation, and power. He crossed to her, hands gentle on her shoulders despite the fury she could see simmering beneath his control. This is the test, Tesoro. He's showing me exactly what it costs to choose you, and he's betting that eventually the price will be too high. Berta felt tears burn behind her eyes, not from fear but from rage. So we fight back. With what? Nino's laugh was bitter. He controls half the city council, has judges and prosecutors in his pocket, can make legitimate businesses look criminal and criminal enterprises look legitimate with a phone call. Then we stop playing his game entirely. Both men stared at her. What are you talking about? Nino asked. Berta's mind was racing, pieces clicking together with the clarity that came from seeing a problem from the outside. Salvatore's power comes from operating in shadows, right? From keeping his business ventures separated from his criminal ones. From appearing legitimate while controlling everything underneath. Yes. So we expose him. She looked between them. Not to the police, they're in his pocket. To the people he's trying to impress. The legitimate business people who donate to his foundation thinking it's actually charity. The politicians who take his money believing it's clean. We show them exactly what they're supporting. Luca's eyes widened. That's insane, Nino finished. And brilliant, and incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than waiting for him to bleed you dry? Berta challenged. More dangerous than living the rest of our lives waiting for his next move? Nino was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he turned to Luca. Call Antonio. Tell him we need every piece of documentation we have on Salvatore's operations. Bank records, shipping manifests, communication logs, everything. Luca nodded and pulled out his phone. Nino looked back at Berta, and there was something new in his expression. Respect mixed with fear and fierce pride. You understand what this means? If we do this, there's no going back. Salvatore will know it was us. The entire organization will know. It's not just war, it's complete destruction of one side or the other. I know. And you're still sure? Berta stepped into his arms, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady against her cheek. I told you, she whispered. We don't break. Building the case against Salvatore took 6 days. 6 days of Berta sitting in Nino's office, surrounded by ledgers and digital files, piecing together the invisible threads that connected legitimate businesses to money laundering, human trafficking, and corruption that reached into government offices at every level. 6 days of barely sleeping, of living on coffee and determination, of seeing exactly how deep the rot went. And 6 days of watching Nino lose pieces of his empire while they worked. Another club raided, another supplier gone, another business partner suddenly unavailable. Salvatore was methodical, precise, devastating. But he'd made one mistake. He'd assumed Berta would break under the pressure of watching Nino suffer for choosing her. He'd assumed wrong. This is enough, she said on the 7th morning, sliding a folder across the desk to Nino. 3 journalists, 2 prosecutors who aren't in Salvatore's pocket, and 1 very ambitious politician who's been looking for a way to make a name for himself. Nino opened the folder, scanning the contents with an expression that shifted from skepticism to grim satisfaction. You built a case. We built a case, she corrected. Your records, my organization, our combined refusal to let him win. He looked up at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was profound. Once we release this, everything changes. Salvatore doesn't just lose power, he loses everything. His family will want revenge. His allies will distance themselves. Every enemy he's ever made will smell weakness. I know. Some of them will come after me, after you, after anyone connected to us. I know. Nino stood, moving around the desk to cup her face in his hands. Why are you willing to risk this? You could walk away right now. Take the out Salvatore offered. Live safe and quiet somewhere far from all of this. Berta held his gaze, letting him see every truth she felt. Because safety without you isn't living. It's just surviving. And I'm done surviving, Nino. I want to live. Messy and dangerous and completely real. She covered his hands with hers. I want mornings where we wake up knowing we fought for each other instead of running from ourselves. I want nights where the danger outside matters less than the trust between us. I want a life where choosing you doesn't mean losing myself. His eyes glistened. Even if it means war? Especially if it means war. She smiled, fierce and certain. Because at least it's a war we're fighting together. The files went out that afternoon. By evening, news outlets were running stories about the Calabrese Foundation's connection to organized crime. By midnight, 3 politicians had issued statements distancing themselves from Salvatore's donations. By dawn, the police had executed warrants on 4 of his businesses. And by noon the next day, Salvatore Calabrese called Nino directly. Berta sat beside him on speakerphone, listening to the voice of a man whose entire empire was collapsing in real time. You have no idea what you've done, Salvatore said, his voice cold with promise. No idea the forces you've set in motion. I know exactly what we've done, Nino replied calmly. We removed a cancer from this city, and yes, the surgery is painful, but the patient will survive. You think this is over? Salvatore laughed, sharp and broken. You think exposing me to journalists and politicians means you win? I think, Berta said, speaking for the first time, that you underestimated what happens when you try to weaponize love against people who've already chosen each other completely. Silence on the other end. Then, you've made an enemy for life, girl. Good, Berta said simply, because I've made a partner for life too, and I'll take that trade every single time. The line went dead. Nino pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had just shifted on its axis. We're going to have to be careful, he murmured against her hair. Very careful. For a very long time. I know. There will be attempts on our lives, threats against people we care about, prices on our heads that make my warehouse hit look like a greeting card. I know. He pulled back to look at her. And you're still sure? Berta thought about the girl who'd walked into the Venetian Grand 6 weeks ago, wearing a borrowed dress and a fake engagement ring, desperate enough to play someone's fiancé for money to save a brother who'd never saved her. She thought about the woman she'd become. Someone who'd stopped the music in a ballroom full of predators and demanded to be seen as equal. Someone who'd chosen love over safety. Partnership over possession. Truth over survival. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she said. And when Nino kissed her, desperate and grateful and absolutely certain, Berta tasted freedom. Not the kind that came from running away. The kind that came from finally standing still in exactly the right place. With exactly the right person. No matter what it cost. 6 months after Salvatore Calabrese's empire collapsed, Berta stood in front of a mirror adjusting a necklace she'd bought with her own money. Not borrowed, not gifted. Hers. The difference mattered. Behind her reflection, Nino appeared in the doorway of their bedroom. Not the penthouse anymore, but a renovated villa on the outskirts of Milan with actual sunlight and gardens that didn't feel like gilded cages. You're nervous, he observed. I'm terrified, she corrected, meeting his eyes in the mirror. Your entire organization is going to be watching me tonight, judging whether I belong, calculating whether you made a mistake choosing me over easier options. Tonight was the annual gathering, the first since Salvatore's fall, the first where Nino would stand as the acknowledged power in Milan's underworld, and the first where Berta would appear not as his protected lover, but as his acknowledged partner. Equal. Visible. Accountable. Nino crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders with familiar warmth. They already know you belong, he said quietly. You brought down Salvatore Calabrese. You reorganized our money laundering operations to be cleaner and more profitable. You've sat in on strategy meetings and contributed ideas that saved us millions. He turned her to face him. You're not on trial tonight, Tesoro. They are, and they know it. The gathering was held in the same converted opera house where everything had started, the Venetian Grand. But this time, when Berta walked through those doors, she wasn't wearing someone else's identity. She was exactly who she'd fought to become. The room fell silent as they entered. Not the shocked silence of 6 months ago. The respectful silence of people recognizing power when they saw it. Nino's hand rested at the small of her back, not possessive, not protective. Supportive. They moved through the crowd together, and Berta noticed the difference immediately. Women didn't whisper behind champagne flutes anymore. They approached directly, introducing themselves, asking questions about business strategies, treating her like someone whose opinion mattered. Men didn't measure her worth in currencies that made her skin crawl. They shook her hand, acknowledged her role, showed the same deference they showed Nino. Not because she was his, because she'd earned it. Berta Gallo. She turned to find a woman in her 50s, elegant and sharp-eyed, extending her hand. I'm Gabriella Russo. I run the Southern Territory operations. The woman's handshake was firm. I wanted to personally thank you for the changes you implemented to our supply chain logistics. We've cut losses by 30%. Berta blinked. Thank you. I'm glad they're working. More than working. You have a gift for seeing patterns others miss. Gabriella leaned closer, her voice dropping. If you ever want to discuss expanding into international markets, I'd value your input. After Gabriella moved on, 3 more people approached with similar sentiments. Respect. Recognition. Partnership. Nino watched it all with an expression that looked suspiciously like pride mixed with, I told you so. Enjoying yourself? He murmured. Shut up, Berta said, but she was smiling. Later, when the formal portion ended and people mingled freely, Nino pulled her onto the same dance floor where she'd stopped the music 6 months ago. "Think anyone will interrupt us this time?" she asked as they moved together. "Not if they value their kneecaps." His smile was dangerous and playful. "You're untouchable now, Tesoro. Partner to the most powerful man in Milan, destroyer of Salvatore Calabrese, strategic genius who makes us all richer. And here I thought you just kept me around for my sparkling personality." "That too." He spun her gently, pulling her back close. "But mostly because you're the only person who's ever made me want to be better than what this world tried to make me." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. "You make me braver than I knew I could be," she whispered back. They danced in silence for a moment, surrounded by people who'd once seen her as a liability and now saw her as essential. Then Nino's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through his usual control. "Marry me." Berta's feet stopped moving. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, louder this time, loud enough that conversations around them stuttered into silence. "Not because I need to possess you or control you or prove anything to anyone in this room." He cupped her face with both hands. "Marry me because I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing that we chose each other, that we built something real out of all this darkness, that we proved love doesn't make you weak, it makes you unstoppable." Tears blurred her vision. Around them, the entire ballroom had gone silent, watching, waiting. "You're asking me this in front of everyone," Berta managed. "I'm asking you this in front of everyone," Nino confirmed, "because I want them all to witness the moment you say yes or no. Whatever you decide, I want it public. Witnessed, real." She thought about the girl who'd walked into this building 6 months ago, so desperate to save her brother that she'd sold herself as someone's fake fiancée. She thought about the woman who'd stopped dancing and demanded to be seen as equal. The woman who'd chosen partnership over safety. Truth over survival. Love over everything else. "Yes," she said. And this time when the applause came, it wasn't polite or calculated. It was genuine. Because everyone in that room understood they weren't just witnessing an engagement. They were witnessing the birth of a new kind of power. One built on choice instead of conquest, partnership instead of possession, and love that refused to be weaponized. Nino kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. And Berta kissed him back, tasting freedom and future and the absolute certainty that she'd finally found home. Not in safety. In standing beside someone who saw her completely and loved her anyway. No matter what it cost. Berta Gallo walked into the Venetian Grand 6 months ago as someone's fake fiancée. She left as Nino Toscano's equal, and tonight she became his future. But here's the thing about love in the Mafia world. Happy endings are just new beginnings wearing different clothes. Because somewhere in the shadows, enemies are watching. Calculating. Waiting for the moment when love makes them vulnerable enough to strike. If this story made you believe that love can be both dangerous and worth it, that partnership is scarier and more powerful than possession, then subscribe to Mafia Desire Secrets. Comment partnership if you believe real love elevates both people. Comment unstoppable if you think Berta and Nino can survive whatever comes next. Because their story isn't over. It's just beginning. And what comes next? The moment where they discover what it costs to build a life together in a world designed to tear people apart. That's a story you won't want to miss. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and remember, love isn't the weakness they tried to make it. It's the weapon they never saw coming. Welcome to Mafia Desire Secrets, where every story ends with a choice. Stay safe and alone. Or risk everything for the person who makes you feel alive. Berta made her choice. What's yours?